Welcome to Pod Studio, level up your fluency from trending topics. Today we are going to talk about OpenAI versus DeepSeek, a comparative analysis.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are kicking off with quite a battle, an industrial clash that's really shaking the foundations of AI. It's like a classic David and Goliath story almost. But this time David's using some serious mathematical genius. An incredibly lean method.
Exactly. It's quite the story.
We're diving deep into this intensifying rivalry between the big one, OpenAI, the American giant, and its pretty formidable new challenger from China, DeepSeek. We've got a stack of sources, technical reports, market analysis, strategic announcements, and our mission really is singular today. We need to unpack DeepSeek's emergence, understand its R1 model, which is genuinely competing globally now, and crucially, we have to try and crack the code on how. How did they build a state-of-the-art model for just, a tiny fraction of the cost?
That cost difference, that's the real headline here. And honestly, it feels like almost an existential threat to the old way of doing things. For years, the mantra in AI was compute is king, right? OpenAI showed everyone that success meant these colossal budgets, access to the world's biggest GPU clusters. You needed money, lots of it. DeepSeek has, it feels like they've completely shattered that assumption. Introducing the R1 model, it's just fundamentally disrupted things. It immediately forced this conversation about, can innovation actually decouple from just raw capital investment?
Okay, let's set the baseline then. The incumbent giant, OpenAI, who DeepSeek is challenging, founded back in December 2015, Sam Altman, Elon Musk, a few others involved early on. And they started with this really ambitious goal, ensuring artificial general intelligence, AGI, benefits all of humanity. That was the mission.
It certainly was, and their early approach really cemented this idea that massive scale was the only path forward. Absolutely. They totally set the pace. Just think back to 2020, the release of GPT-3.
Yeah, that was big.
Huge. That was the model with 175 billion parameters. I mean, that's 175 billion tiny switches the model had to learn to flip just right. It just blew the doors open on things like language translation, complex text generation. It was groundbreaking.
And then came ChatGPT.
Right. November 2022. That brought conversational AI, right into everyone's living room, basically. But the absolute peak of that scale strategy, that had to be GPT-4 in 2023. It wasn't just bigger, it was smarter. Multimodal, it could handle images and text, and its performance was genuinely hitting human-level benchmarks, like passing a simulated bar exam in the top 10%.
Wow.
So OpenAI clearly established that the cost of entry for elite AI, we're talking billions.
Okay, yeah, that context is critical. The old religion was scale. Big data, massive compute. OpenAI's whole technical approach relied on training over these enormous data sets, consuming just immense computational resources, basically throwing compute power at the problem until it worked.
Pretty much, yeah.
So if scale was OpenAI's religion, we really have to look at how DeepSeek managed to achieve something similar without that massive offering. Which brings us nicely to the challenger. DeepSeek, much newer startup, established 2023, Hangzhou, China. Founded by Ling Wenfeng. He's a former math prodigy, apparently, and a hedge fund manager. So, a guy who clearly knows how to find efficiency.
This really sounds like it.
And crucially, he somehow managed to get his hands on about 10,000 NVIDIA GPUs, even with export controls being what they are. Recognizing, I guess, that even an efficient model needs some hardware to get started.
Sure, you need something to run on. But the hardware, that's not really the main story here. The defining achievement, that came in January 2025, the DeepSeek R1 model. It performs right up there with the US leaders. But here's the kicker.
Yeah.
It was introduced as a fully open source model. MIT license, anyone could use it, build on it.
Open source and competitive. That's already interesting.
But wait, here's the truly staggering part. The financial detail that makes this a disruption, not just another competitor. The cost. The R1 model was developed start to finish with a budget of less than $6 million.
$6 million? Are you serious?
Dead serious. Less than 6. Now, when you think about U.S. competitors spending anywhere from, say, $100 million up to maybe even $1 billion on similar models.
$6 million is nothing. It's like a rounding error on those budgets.
Precisely. It's barely comparable.
Unbelievable. And that detail alone, under $6 million, that must have sent shockwaves, right? The source material notes that within weeks of R1 coming out, big tech players, NVIDIA, Tesla, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they all saw significant drops in market cap. This wasn't just on academic papers. This was proof that the Maybe the economic moat around Silicon Valley AI dominance wasn't as deep as people thought.
Exactly right. The shockwaves weren't just about performance, though it was good. It was the efficiency. The indication being, if a startup can achieve this for $6 million, what does that actually do to the valuation of companies built entirely on the assumption that you need those massive resources?
Okay, right. Now we get to the core of this deep dive. The cost implication is staggering. But how? How did they do it? What's fascinating, as you said, is this huge difference in the computational requirements. Let's dig into the numbers.
Yeah, the difference is, well, it's almost absurd. DeepSeek R1 training used approximately 2.78 million GPU hours.
Okay, 2.78 million.
And remember, they did this using the less powerful NVIDIA H800 GPUs because of export restrictions, which means they actually had to work harder with less capable hardware.
Right, okay. So 2.78 million on H800s, how does that compare?
Compare that to the industry estimates for GPT-4, roughly 60 million GPU hours.
60.
Yeah. 60 million versus about 2.8 million.
Wow. That's not just a small difference. That's a massive, almost 22-fold reduction in compute time for a model that's comparable.
It's an incredible difference. And it directly explains the training cost gap, right? Less than $6 million versus potentially hundreds of millions, maybe even $1 billion.
Okay, that makes sense for training. But the efficiency doesn't just stop once the model's built, does it? What about actually using it?
Absolutely not. That's another key point. The sources confirm the operational costs running inferences are also profoundly cheaper. DeepSeek R1 is estimated to be about 32.8 times cheaper than GPT-4 just for processing input and output tokens. Every single query.
32 times cheaper to run.
Roughly, yes. So this isn't just about saving money on R&D. It means the cost of every single interaction, every question you ask it, drops dramatically.
That really is democratizing AI access, isn't it? Makes high-end AI potentially available to way more people and companies.
That's the potential, exactly.
So the secret sauce clearly isn't just the hardware they managed to get. It has to be in the recipe, the training method. Let's break down those training methodologies. We've got some data on this. What did OpenAI do that was so compute-heavy?
Okay, so OpenAI uses what's now seen as the, let's say, traditional compute-intensive path. They start with supervised fine-tuning, or SFT. Think of this like hiring a massive team of expensive human tutors. They label data, provide examples, meticulously guide the model, teaching it exactly what to say for countless scenarios.
Okay, intensive human labor up front.
Very. And then that's followed by reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF. Here, humans rate the model's outputs, basically saying good answer or bad answer to align it better with human preferences and safety standards.
More human feedback.
Yes, and both steps require massive human effort and massive compute power to process all that detailed instruction and feedback.
Right. So the cost is directly tied to paying for all that human supervision and then crunching all that refined, expensive data.
Precisely. Now, DeepSeek, they completely flip the script.
How so?
They use what they call a pure RL first approach. Internally, it's known as DeepSeek R10. Think about the difference. Instead of hiring those expensive human tutors right away, they built an autonomous learning engine. Yeah. The model develops its reasoning, its understanding of language structure, complex capabilities, largely on its own, through reinforcement learning. It's like millions and millions of self-simulated attempts, failures, learning cycles.
So wait. If SFT is like teaching a kid carefully by hand, pure RL sounds more like throwing the machine into a really challenging but structured environment and just letting it figure things out, letting it have these self-evolution moments or aha moments, as the material puts it.
That's a good analogy, yeah. It learns the core reasoning first.
And then they bring in human alignment later.
Exactly. They incorporate human preference alignment after the model has already developed strong autonomous reasoning capabilities.
So does that mean they're essentially skipping or at least drastically reducing the most resource-intensive and expensive human labor part of that initial training phase?
Yeah.
The SFT part.
In essence, yes. It seems they found a very capital-efficient way around those massive initial human supervision costs. It lets the model get smart before they spend resources refining its personality and making sure it's aligned, which saves huge amounts of compute that would otherwise be spent trying to align a less capable base model.
Okay, but hold on. If they kind of cut corners on that initial supervision,
Yeah.
what's the trade-off? Is the performance really identical? A model trained, relatively speaking, on a shoestring budget compared to $1 billion model.
Yeah.
there must be some limitations, right?
That's the nuance. And the industry is still sort of dissecting this. GPT-4 is still widely seen as having maybe the edge in really complex, rigorous reasoning, mathematics, coding, fields where absolute precision is critical.
Yep.
But DeepSeek R1, it's noted for having really exceptional performance in things like creative writing, general conversation. Users report its outputs often have more personality, maybe more flair. It's like a different flavor of intelligence.
Interesting. One focused more on emergent reasoning, the other perhaps more on that heavily supervised accuracy from the start.
Possibly, yeah. And then there's a transparency factor, which is huge here.
Right, the open source aspect.
DeepSeek's commitment to being fully open source, MIT license. They even released smaller, distilled versions of the model from 1.5 billion up to 70 billion parameters.
Making the tech accessible.
Exactly. It makes their whole efficiency strategy globally available for others to build on. OpenAI's models, in contrast, are famously proprietary closed source.
So DeepSeek isn't just building cheap models. They're actively trying to make their approach smart, cheap, open, the new default.
Seems to be the strategy. They're focused on distilling those reasoning capabilities down into smaller models too, which is also significant.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The reaction. How did the dominant player, OpenAI, react to this sudden, low-cost disruption? This wasn't just some new competitor. It felt like an existential challenge to their whole expensive business model.
Yeah, the reaction was, well, it was a mix. Kind of respect, but also defiance. Sam Altman, OpenAI CEO, he publicly acknowledged DeepSeek's capabilities, said they were impressive, especially the cost-effectiveness.
Okay, so he acknowledged it.
He did. And he confirmed OpenAI plans to speed up their own release of enhanced AI models. He framed the competition as invigorating, a catalyst for faster innovation on their side, too.
Invigorating, huh?
That was the word used. He essentially said something like, we will obviously deliver much better models, and it's legit invigorating to have a new competitor. But he paired that respect with a pretty firm statement.
Which was?
That he remains confident that substantial, sustained investment in huge amounts of computing power is still absolutely essential for future breakthroughs, for getting to, true AGI.
Okay, so a polite nod, maybe, followed by, that's nice, but we're still bringing the supercomputer to the fight. Big compute is still the real path forward.
That's the underlying message, yeah. They're not abandoning their compute-heavy strategy just because someone found a cheaper way to get close on today's benchmarks.
Got it. And on DeepSeek's side, the strategy seems pretty clear then. Global expansion. Leveraging that low cost and the open source status to pull in users, developers, companies who were maybe priced out of the high-end AI game before.
That seems to be exactly it. That open source strategy is brilliant for getting rapid adoption, but it also creates its own challenges. Friction points.
Like what?
Compliance, mainly. The sources mention users reporting instances where the DeepSeek chatbot apparently self-censors.
Oh, on what?
Politically sensitive topics, particularly in certain regions. Initial answers might get generated, but then quickly replaced with generic, non-committal messages.
So that immediately highlights attention, right?
Yeah.
Open source transparency is one thing, but navigating global regulations and content moderation, that's...
It really is. The cost of entry for the code might be low thanks to open source and efficiency, but the cost of regulatory compliance and responsible deployment in a global market, that's still very high, and maybe a challenge for a leaner operation.
That's a really important point to keep in perspective.
Okay.
But if we connect this all back to the bigger picture, the competition itself, regardless of the challenges, it is driving massive innovation, isn't it? It's forcing everyone, including OpenAI, to look for efficiency gains.
Oh, absolutely.
Those market cap losses we mentioned earlier weren't just like a temporary blip. They confirmed that the entire market now has to grapple with the fact that AI dominance might no longer be purely about who has the biggest checkbook.
Exactly. The competition is definitely resulting in more accessible, more efficient AI technologies popping up all over. That traditional argument, that only a handful of incredibly well-funded firms in Silicon Valley could really shape the future of AI, that's looking highly questionable right now.
So wrapping this up, the key takeaway for you, the listener, seems to be this. The race has clearly moved beyond just sheer brute force compute. This competition between OpenAI's supercompute-intensive SFT-RLHF approach and DeepSeek's incredibly capital-efficient RL-first method. It highlights a monumental lesson. Innovation at the frontier doesn't always require billion-dollar budgets anymore. Sometimes, maybe a fundamentally smarter training recipe, a better approach, can bridge that resource gap and still deliver global impact.
Yeah, and the combination of that open source model with the extreme cost efficiency from DeepSeek R1, it's clearly accelerating the democratization of AI, making powerful tools available much more widely, which fundamentally alters the landscape. And it leaves us with this really important question the whole industry is now scrambling to answer. What happens to that traditional competitive advantage, having massive computational resources, when these highly capable autonomous reasoning models can apparently be trained and released globally for less than $6 million?
It really feels like the arms race is shifting. It's not just about who can build the biggest GPU cluster anymore, but maybe who can design the smartest, most efficient training engine. Lots to think about there. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.